Alexandru Coman, and I really hope that you'll enjoy this webinar. Today, we'll talk a little bit about cloud infrastructure and how we can save some costs. And furthermore, we'll try to see how we can do this as part of the process instead of having one time and expecting to have the costs decreasing itself. A little bit about myself. I'm currently a software architect within Yonder, and in the past I had the unique opportunity to be involved in various projects with different maturity and complexity. And from that exposure, I can share a lot of the things that I had the opportunity to see them, and also to get a broader overview regarding the impact of certain decisions. A little disclaimer for today, because we'll have only 20 minutes to discuss a very big and large topic. I will try to focus on the things that might cause cost increase and how we can address those things. But feel free to ask a lot of questions if the items that we're interested into aren't covered by this presentation. So in terms of cloud infrastructure, there's a bunch of reasoning why an organization would like to start using those. Usually we'll have these 5 pillars. Most organizations will try to go to a cloud solution, if it's private or public, in order to get better performance. Usually, most of the cloud providers will change their hardware often, so we'll get a boost in performance by using more powerful or modern hardware underneath. Besides that, nowadays, all the applications should be reliable and to be all time online. So that thing was harder to achieve in classic or traditional infrastructure. And most of the cloud providers will offer reliability features of the box, like redundancy, like disaster recovery, and other things like that. Furthermore, another reason to take cloud infrastructure would be to improve the productivity. Right now, we'll not have to manage the hardware, we'll not have to change the disks, and we'll not care about the underneath infrastructure. All that infrastructure will be served us as a service, and we'll get a chance to focus on what really matters. So we'll try to build and improve the quality of services that we offer instead of having to play around with various things in order to keep our infrastructure up and ready. And in addition to that, every cloud provider will offer us all the features that we need to improve the security of our infrastructure. And in most of the cases, they will guide us or will send us various notifications regarding the best practices that we should follow by using their services. And of course, last but not the least are the costs. Usually, when we go to cloud infrastructure, we'll cut some costs from the hardware. And if we implement the infrastructure in the right way, we'll have somewhere 30% decrease in our costs. But of course, we need to follow some rules and to be sure that the solutions that we pick for our infrastructure are the right one. In order to achieve a very powerful and modern infrastructure, and at the beginning, most organizations envision a very straightforward road. They will start to look around, they will start to see what are the options in the market, what is the most suitable tech stack for them. They will spend a lot of time implementing that solution. Afterwards, they will just need to validate if all the things work fine, consolidate things if needed, and go to production. Afterwards, just gardening, keeping things up to date, improve them, and check things work just fine. Sadly, it's not the case. In most of the cases, we'll have a loop and we'll have a bunch of migrations and transitions between the initial infrastructure and the final one, because the client behavior change, their needs change, And also our landscape will grow. For most organizations, they will start to grow to get more and more people interested in their services. And because of that, they will need to change a little bit the landscape or their infrastructure. And with those changes, or with the initial forecast of the costs involved by the infrastructure, most of the organization will see that the initial forecast will not be applicable anymore. And in some cases, the cost will go skyrocket. So we'll get to the main topic of this presentation and how we can improve our quality, how we can improve our performance, but without having a continuous increase of our costs. So as a root cause in most of the organizations that have unpredicted costs, the root cause for that is in the first stage of every single infrastructure decision, in the first phase when they analyze the solution. In this stage, it's extremely important to know exactly how your infrastructure would look like and what that infrastructure should accommodate in terms of applications that should be accessible to your clients. For this stage, it's extremely important to have an infrastructure assessment in order to know exactly what are the components, what are the purpose of for each component in the infrastructure. And also you need to keep track of those components' behavior in time, because for most of them will be various changes, sometimes breaking changes that can affect both costs and performance of your infrastructure. Another common mistake that will affect costs in this stage is to base our forecast and our business plan on presumptions or on other companies' experience, because every single organization is unique and they have their own tricks and tips. They will need to see exactly what will be suitable for them. There's no solution that will fit all the cases. And in order to take an informed decision, we need to look at whatever historical data we have for our application. Data from load testing, data from previous environments, data from the current cloud environment, and things like that, in order to have real data to base our decisions. After that, if we analyze and we take the proper decision in order to go further with our infrastructure, we'll need to look somewhere else. So we'll need to look at the things that we consider important to validate if they are still important. Usually we'll gather a lot of waste in our ecosystems. We'll try to experiment with new things. We'll try to add new things. We'll try to add new features involving different various other technologies. And if we don't have an accurate asset inventory, we'll end up with a bunch of things that will be in our infrastructure, might cause various other problems, but they aren't needed anymore. So the asset inventory, even it's not directly correlated to the cost, if we'll invest in such thing and we'll have an automated way to inventory every asset that we have, we'll have a broader picture and we'll know what are the assets that we need to retain or to retire. In most of the cases in the infrastructure we discover a bunch of resources that were there for historical reason. And after we get rid of those, we got a very big and important cost reduction without actually doing anything on the infrastructure part. Besides that, nowadays, with all the power that we'll have with containers and other ways of isolating various assets, it's extremely important to try to increase the density of the application or assets that we have on the compute nodes that we have. In the past, we tended to put one asset, one application, one component on a particular machine in order to be sure that it's isolated and properly managed. But nowadays, we can achieve the same kind of isolation without having to put one component on one machine. Of course, If we try to increase the density, there's another thing that we should look into, and that's the noisy neighbor. If we share resources with various other components, and one of the components will start to drain all the resources from that particular node, other components might encounter some issues. But of course, for this part, we have a bunch of technical solutions depending on the vendor that we use underneath in order to prevent this kind of behavior. Another part that is usually ignored when we look at the cost of the infrastructure is the final stage of the transition to the new solution or the refactor that we ship. The final part where we need to validate and to prepare the new things to go to production usually tended to be used only to have some smoke tests in order to see if the application behaves as expected, and we ship, if the tests are green, we ship that direct to production. And this stage, in most of the cases, it's dangerous to just base our green light to production on presumptions. And for this stage, it's important to have real data. And real data can be obtained by having a very powerful observability platform in our ecosystem. The observability platform will give us real data regarding the resource consumptions, how the load or the test load that we have for that particular change will affect the infrastructure, and we can take some decision based on real scenarios, and we can expect how various spikes will impact our infrastructure. Better testing, but with observability, we'll prepare ourselves for various scenarios that might harm our infrastructure and, of course, might impact our costs. And there can be a bunch of examples. For example, one of the usual one is the logging part. If we test things, most probably we'll like to have very verbose logs. And if we go with that in production and we have 1 million clients that will hit our application, most probably will create a bunch of logs, and that will most probably consume some money in order to digest those logs, some storage, and in some cases might end up with very unforeseen scenarios like downtime because we'll exceed all the storage because we didn't expect to get there. For the validation part, as I said, it's important to invest in observability and, of course, based on the data that we have in observability, to set the limits for each component. Seeing what's the behavior in normal circumstances, we can expect how many resources should we allocate for each component. And afterwards, having a proactive approach, we can see how the application scales up and down depending on the traffic, and we can constantly changing or addressing particular issues in terms of resource consumption for every single component. So until now, we discussed about the first part of every single transition to a better infrastructure and the last part. And in most of the discussion regarding the costs, the story is about how we can use all the nice features that we have in every single cloud provider in order to allow us to cut costs, to address particular things, to take advantage of the features that we have in that particular infrastructure, like managed services that will cut us some costs in terms of maintenance, and in some cases will be a boost in performance. For this part, we will just summarize it at a single recommendation, and that will be to invest in automation. Every time you invest in automation will get you some extra time that your teams can use to research new solution, invest in new features, and of course, will prepare your infrastructure to go to other vendors if needed. If you get to the point where most of the critical processes in your infrastructure are automated and all the redundant work is automated, you can easily pick a different cloud migration strategy in order to go to other vendor that will offer you better experience or lower costs and things like that. And of course, we'll prepare you for the scenario where something bad happens. If you'll be able to recreate your infrastructure from scratch because you automated all the important parts of the infrastructure, then you can go to sleep without any worries because you know that whatever happens, you'll have a plan for that. Because we'll have just a few minutes left, I will try to summarize some of the thoughts that I presented until now. And maybe I will start with some common misconceptions regarding the cloud infrastructure. In terms of costs, many organizations predict to have a cost decreased when they will start to migrate to cloud or to migrate to other vendor or to change the shape of the infrastructure. But in the past, we saw that in most of the cases, every single approach where we aim to cut on costs will start with a spike in cost because we'll experiment with new things. We'll need to get real data to base our later on decisions and things like that. And afterwards, the costs can decrease and we can achieve our target. But it's not, it's scary at the beginning, but it's not that unpredicted to just have a cost increase after such decision. We need to take the decision for the further migration after we gather some data. And in order to gather that data, we need to wait some time. Besides that, there's a bunch of other misconceptions regarding cloud infrastructure, and maybe one of the most dangerous one is that we'll use one solution to address all the things that we need to address. And as any other technology or programming language, there's no tool that will do all the things for us. And if we try to force one solution for all the problems that we have, most probably we'll end up with higher costs or an infrastructure that's hard to maintain. So in most of the cases, the recommendation would be to use the right tool, the right platform, the right service from the vendor, instead of trying to force our infrastructure to fit in just one solution. Besides that, that's nothing guaranteed in terms of cost savings, performance, security. In most of the cases, we'll need to do something in order to achieve those things. They are more than possible, but we need to fight to get to the point where we achieve our targets. Either it's performance or costs. And some baby steps to get there. One of the most strange item from this slide will be the first one, and it's something that our CTO usually present, and is that the best solution that we can implement is the solution that our team is ready to use. So with proper training and with proper education and with the proper tooling that are team friendly, we can achieve better results. Because otherwise, if we will force a specific technology to our team and our team is not ready yet to take advantage of all the things that solution have to offer, most probably we'll start with misconfiguration, limits that are improperly set and things like that, that in time will either increase the time required for maintenance, either will increase the costs. And of course, cloud is just a tool and will accommodate our application. And right now, the infrastructure is built and tailored on the application. But it's important to remember that the application should be guarded as well. We need to improve the application in order to be sure that the application can leverage all the things that the infrastructure have to offer. And if we start to think about the infrastructure and the cloud infrastructure as another project that we deliver, and we apply the same metrics to it, we'll start to see that we can build awesome things, we can start to automate a lot of things, and in the end, we can achieve better performance, better security, and of course, lower costs through a lot of research, real data, and a lot of migrations. So going to cloud will not be the final destination, will be just the start of the journey. And from that point, we'll always need to research what is suitable for us, what other options we have, what application changes should be performed in order to take advantage of what cloud have to offer. And we need to know exactly what we have in our infrastructure. We need to know every single bit and pieces from our products, infrastructure, components, and things like that in order to take informed decisions. And because our time is almost done, I would like to ask you to ask whatever question do you have, or if you have some items that you'd like to discuss that weren't covered in the current presentation. Don't be shy. I like a lot of questions and preferably hard ones. Well, we have the first question. Can we gradually migrate our infrastructure to cloud, or do you need to do it all at once? From my point of view, always will be better to have a baby step approach where we start to move things to cloud that can take advantage of that infrastructure. Usually, if we go with a big bang, so we'll migrate all the things at once. If something goes sideways, it will be hard to pinpoint exactly what's the root cause of that. If we have a very large infrastructure and we lift and shift to a cloud platform, we'll start to see maybe some differences. Maybe we'll see an improvement in performance or some issues with particular components that try to communicate one to each other. So if we have enough time to go that migration, so there are some cases where we are forced to go to cloud because some legal regulations where we don't have other option or our hardware start to become deprecated. But if we have enough time to plan this thing and to go to cloud, it will be better to start with small pieces to see what's the impact, to analyze what might be the changes required for the application, or if we'll not have a monolith, we have the opportunity to start migrating small components first, see how they behave, what would be the added value there, and furthermore to start extending our infrastructure, add more components, change more things in our infrastructure, and start to analyze again, see what's worth it to be there, what not, and to add more things and to change more things in order to achieve our goals. The second question, if I decide to migrate an application from an on-premise to a public cloud, do you recommend to start with a hybrid setup or migrate everything in public cloud and then start optimizing performance and costs? If you have a private cloud, most probably you'll have a bunch of special requirements there. Usually we started to build private clouds in order to tailor to our application. If we think about the public cloud, then we'll have some requirements and some constraints from that particular vendor. If we start with a hybrid approach, then we'll need to be sure how we can ship information from the private to the public cloud. Every single public cloud provider will offer us a solution to send that data on an encrypted channel, or we can start using a VPN if we don't have any other option there. A hybrid cloud will allow us to have parts of the application on the private one, maybe some parts that are legacy or heavy, and to start shipping components to the public cloud. But in the end, will depend of the goal. If you want to take advantage or to leverage some of the features from the public cloud from parts of your application, and that's the final setup that you'd like, the hybrid cloud will be, of course, an option. If you plan to have the whole infrastructure there in a few weeks, months, years, then maybe the hybrid approach will be just a hassle, and you'll need to invest more time and money to keep those things up and running and to have a proper connectivity between them. So, as I said, most of these things are tailored to the context of your business, but as a first impression, I will avoid having a hybrid setup because we'll increase the maintenance and will increase the chances that something will go wrong. And if it's possible, I will start to test if my application behaves properly in the cloud, prepare a migration part, see if there are some components from my infrastructure that can be migrated first without affecting the current one, and gradually move all the things there, but without having the whole infrastructure binded together, all the things from my private cloud with all the things that are hosted in the public one. Of course, if you have other questions, please feel free to address those after this webinar ends. As I said, we love questions. So if you have any curiosity, feedback, or you want to start a debate based on your context or your business needs, just please feel free to ask us. We'll try to answer as soon as we can. And if there aren't any other questions, thank you very much for being here today. I hope that the presentation was useful, and see you soon.